and how they utilize sports to transform a city. And then I look at Jerry Colangelo and how his vision, his business acumen, and everything that went with basketball transformed a city. I am promising you this. You only get one of these in a city's lifetime. Somebody that had the ability to negotiate the vision to see and utilize sports facilities and teams to grow a city. And to also, in his latest project, help grow a phenomenal campus at GCU. I say to you, how about a nice round of applause for the 2016 Gold Medal Executive Director of Team USA, Jerry Colangelo. Thank you.
Thank you. That's just how I scripted it.
Jerry, I think everybody is curious about the experience of Rio. This was a very unique set of challenges with a different kind of variable, with a different type of basketball team. Maybe not the big star power, but still the success. I'm going to hand it over to you on your overview of what was yet another gold medal for Team USA.
Well, before we get into some of those specifics, I think it would be good to go back, I think 7 years, 8 years ago, when I was part of the Chicago group that represented the city of Chicago in Copenhagen in front of the International Olympic Committee. We, Chicago at that point, was one of 4 finalists for hosting these 2016 Olympics. And I had in the back of my mind back then, boy, what a great way for me to finish my run with USA Basketball. You know, we won in Beijing in 08, we won in London in 12, but to me, going back full circle, back to Chicago, which is where my roots are, to have the Olympics in Chicago, and the same with Coach K at Duke, who's from there also. I use this line, and it's, if anyone here from Chicago? Good. So here was my line. My line was, we win another gold medal in Chicago, and then Mike and I would walk off into the sunset into Lake Michigan. The problem is, that's where the sun rises. It doesn't set in that direction in the east. But that was a real eye-opener for me in Copenhagen. Now, there again, for those from Chicago, there was a family, the Daly family, that ran the city. And they certainly came up with that expression, you vote early and you vote often. And that democratic machine in Chicago was like the old story of how big city politics were run. And so everything was wired. They knew before any vote that they had the vote done before it actually took place. So Mayor Richard Daley's son was the mayor 7, 8 years ago, and he asked me to be on his committee. So we go to Copenhagen. We all were assigned countries to work the delegates to make sure we would have support for Chicago. And the 4 candidate cities were Tokyo, Madrid, Rio, and Chicago, 4. So in our presentation, we had the President Obama and his wife Michelle. We had Oprah Winfrey. We had a star-studded cast, if you will. That aside, there was no doubt in my mind that Chicago had the best, was going to have the best package of presentation. Now, what was important? The financial piece of it, to support it, the infrastructure, the hotels, the restaurants, the venues. Because, by way of example, Rio had nothing. They didn't have any venues. And so I didn't see Rio as a threat. I didn't see the other 2 cities as a threat. And after we made our presentation, we were told to leave the auditorium, which we did. We went to our hotel. On big screens, we watched the other 3 cities make their presentations. And with each presentation, we were more emboldened each time. this is ours to win. I mean, we're not going to lose this thing. I mean, we have the best deal. So we were told to be back at 4 p.m. for the verdict, if you will. We're 10 minutes away from the auditorium. We're still on a bus, and one of the guys on the bus had a BlackBerry. You don't hear that much anymore, BlackBerry. And he says, "We're out. They've already selected Rio. They didn't even pay us the courtesy of waiting for us to get back in the building." So we just turned the bus around and went back to the hotel, and we didn't have a party. We had it all set up to have a party in Copenhagen, but it turned out to be, something much less than that. It was wired. It really was wired in terms of high-level politics and paybacks and all kinds of things, because it didn't make sense. All of the concerns that we had about Rio, they didn't have infrastructure, they didn't have hotels, they didn't have the venues, the political unrest, but somehow, some way, that committee saw fit to pick them. We knew nothing about Zika. That was not common knowledge or anything like that at the time. It wasn't an issue. And so, it's Rio. It wasn't Chicago. I have to tell you, this whole time, I knew it should have been in Chicago. It would have been a great thing, blah, blah, blah. But I think we have to take a real hard look at the cost of putting on an Olympics for a country. It's not really, the other countries, by the way, they get government support. In the United States, that's not true. It's the city that puts this on. For example, Los Angeles is trying to get it for 2024, and by the way, they were working real hard, and I think they have a great shot to host the Olympics, but it's a big-time operation. So billions of dollars went into building venues in Rio, and I don't know how much you followed it or saw any of the Olympics, but there were a lot of empty seats in many of the venues. Not for us, not for basketball. We were sold out every game. But many seats were open. And I would say the media did a big job of turning people off. There was so much, said in advance about security and Zika and so on and so forth that many people stayed away. So my experience was a little bit different once we got there, but I'm going to give you a chance to ask a question specifically.
Well, I think when you look back, Jerry, and we have many business students here pursuing their MBA, Montreal in '76, you look at various venues, and then after the Olympics leaves, many of these venues are not used ultimately as much as they should. Financially, it becomes a sticky proposition. When you look at bids and you're confident with certain bids like Chicago, is there a new model out there? You mentioned government support. We saw what happened with Sochi. Of course, Putin wanted to make sure that was going to be properly funded, and when you have a dictator, you can do that. But what about the financial ramifications of what type of money goes into putting on an Olympic Games and then the consequences thereafter?
Well, if you could stay away from investing billions in venues, that would go a long way toward, making a level playing field. And Chicago they were only going to build one venue, and they also had a plan for what would happen with that venue once the Olympics was over in the Olympic Village south of McCormick Place along the lake. That's not true. Where we had to go in Rio, it was like away from everything, all these white buildings, and it was not easy to get to where we had to go for practice, for games, and that kind of thing. But we didn't have any real issues. Did we have any security issues? Zero. It was zero. If you go into bad neighborhoods, you're at risk because there's a lot of bad neighborhoods, because it's a depressed economy in Rio. It's the political unrest is at an all-time low. So people were really down, the locals. They didn't get any bang for their buck for the investment that was made. And that was sad. I could see it all around us. But our experience, our team experience could not have been any better. Did I see any mosquitoes? I did. But thank goodness, being Italian, they stayed away from me. So we didn't have any issues with mosquitoes. We didn't have any issues with security. There were some nice restaurants, and we didn't go out that often because we didn't think we wanted to stay close to home. And we were on a boat. When we sent our people in advance 2 years ago to look at hotel accommodations to take care of our teams, the men and women's teams, I mean, it was so slim pickings that we were struggling to find out where we would be. And trust me, Olympic Village, the concept of the Olympic Village and why wouldn't you stay there, trust me, most of them don't stay there. And most of the athletes come in and do their thing and leave. They don't stay for the entire time of the Olympics, 2.5 weeks. Basketball is one of 2 sports that's there the entire length of time. So your needs are much different than someone competing in fencing, by way of example, or some of the other sports. So my experience was fine in Rio. We had a boat. Cisco, the technology company, who's one of our partners with USA Basketball, they leased a boat, an Italian boat that had like 200 suites on it, and they kept 1/3 of the boat for their customers from around the world who they brought in for the Olympics, and we leased the other 2/3 of the boat. And so we had great accommodations, we had great food, we didn't have any issues, but you got a little bit tired of being on the boat. You just did, even though we were anchored right there. It's a little bit different than being like it would have been in Chicago, let's put it that way. I would have felt much more at home. But it was a great experience in winning again. We've been on a great run, 3 gold medals in a row in the Olympics, in 8, 12, and 16. And now there's a transition taking place with Coach K stepping down as the coach. But just think about how great a situation it is to go from Coach K to Popovich, the coach in San Antonio. It's going to be seamless in that sense as we get ready for 2020 in Tokyo. And that is my last Olympics for sure, because I would have retired from that responsibility in Rio. But Popovich put a condition on him taking the job. He says, I'll do it with one condition, that you stay. He didn't want to take on the responsibility without someone who's been there. That's really what that was all about. So I didn't have a choice. So I'm back.
There's so many interesting dimensions to what Jerry just said. I want you to think about this timeline, because back in Athens, Team USA won bronze. And quite frankly, there was a bit of embarrassment. This was our game. I remember as a youngster in 1972, when the then Soviet Union literally stole a game from Team USA. I remember Doug Collins bowing his head on that loss as a youngster back in eastern Pennsylvania and saying, how could this happen? This is our game. And I think it's important, as in business and in life, sports is a microcosm of who you surround yourself with, who you put on your roster, the culture you create. So let's fast forward now to after Greece, when Commissioner David Stern, along with other forces in basketball, come to this man right here and say, we got to get our act together. You saw the results, 3 straight gold medals. Let's go back, because I think for business students, who you hire, Coach K, how you approach and change the culture, and the certain degree of respect that you command, Jerry, and I'll say this on your behalf, when players say, that's the Godfather, they say it with great respect. They say it because of his many accomplishments. And they say it in terms of saying this is the type of chemistry that we need with leadership. And this is what started after Athens. I'll have you pick it up from there.
Sure. Some of you may have heard part of this, so bear with me if you would. Some of you may not have. But 2004 was kind of a watershed year for me personally. I made a decision to sell the Suns, who I'd given birth to. So that was no small decision, but it was a decision that I made in the best interest of my family for the future. And so I did that. And then a few months later, I stepped down from the Diamondbacks that I'd given birth to also. And, you know, that wasn't something that I had sought. I was asked to go after baseball because people felt that I was the one who had the credibility to get the franchise, build the stadium, and do all those things. And then we won a World Series in our 4th year. So there wasn't much left to do, and it's not that I needed a job. And there was somebody else in ownership who wanted to be me. So I made it easy for him, and I stepped down. And then also later in the year, I was fortunate enough to go into the Basketball Hall of Fame. That was a big thing in anyone's career. And then just before the end of that year, I found out I had prostate cancer, and I had to make a big decision. And so a lot of trauma, a lot of things happened in 2004. So I'm home recuperating early in 05 when I got the call that Jude alluded to from the commissioner, and he said, would you take over USA Basketball? And as I usually am, I'm instinctive, and I said, yeah, I'll do it, with 2 conditions. He said, what are they? I said, number 1, full autonomy. I pick the coaches, I pick the players, no more politics, no more votes. He said, okay, you got it. What's number 2? I said, I don't want to hear about a budget. And he yelled, a little bit, and I let him go, and I said, David, are you finished? He says, yes. I said, it's still number 2. And he acquiesced. And then I assured him, don't worry about it. I just wanted your word on that. I'll raise the money. By that I meant I'll sell all the sponsorships that pay for all the things I want to do, because I have to do it my way in order to get the desired result. That's a condition. And so that was the beginning. The first thing I knew that I had seen, and because I've been around, is that we had lost the respect around the world. The world basketball community thought less of USA Basketball by the way it conducted themselves, the players' attitudes, just everything about it. We didn't show respect to them. And so what needed to take place? We needed to change the culture, without question. And it started with showing respect. And so I called a meeting in Chicago of Olympic coaches going back to 1960. Pete Newell was the coach of a team in Rome that had Jerry West, Jerry Lucas, and a great bunch of guys that won a gold medal. We had all but 2 coaches who came, and about 20 incredible players, most of them are all Hall of Famers, who all were Olympians, and they all showed up to support me, and I would have been foolish not to use them because of my relationships with them and hear them out. And I had each one of them speak. And, you know, there's Jerry West and Michael Jordan, and you name them, they were there, all these people. And they talked about their experience as an Olympian. They also talked about the present circumstances as they saw it. And then thirdly, what they thought needed to happen, you know, in terms of the future. And then after everyone had a chance to speak, I put like coaches' names up on a board, college coaches, pro coaches. And before all of that took place, I had 2 candidates, Coach K and Popovich. Those were my 2 guys. back in '05. And so as people spoke to each of those names, it was interesting how it all played out. And there was a great moment that took place. For those of you who may not have followed it that closely, like Duke's big rivalry in the ACC is North Carolina. And Dean Smith was another Hall of Fame coach who was Coach K's biggest rival. And Dean Smith was a former Olympic coach. And he got up and he said, there's only one college coach on that board. There's some big names on the board. There's only one guy who could get the job done, who has the respect of players across the board, pro, college, whatever. That's Coach K. To hear it come from his lips was really kind of a neat moment. And so that wasn't a surprise that Coach K was the guy who got the most support, but hearing it from Dean Smith was really special. And then on the pro side, there was no doubt that Popovich was the guy that got all the support. In fact, the number 2 guy was Pat Riley, who wasn't even coaching at the time. He was finished coaching. So my intent was to meet with both of them. It turned out that I offered the job to Coach K, and that was the first, I would tell you in the meeting, and Popovich is just like him in this sense. Totally committed. He's a military guy. He understands selfless service, had the respect of all the players, almost jumped through the phone when I called him. He was so enthused about it. And I used the expression and the analogy, and maybe in these times it's not that appropriate, but in times of war in the foxhole, who do you want next to you? You want someone like a Coach K. You want someone like a Popovich. And so Coach K was the guy I picked. And then I made a decision to meet with each player eyeball to eyeball and talk to them. And so once that happened, the buy-in was amazing. I mean, everyone, I said, look, I don't need to do this. I'm doing it because I care. I'm proud to be an American. I'm proud that basketball has been such an important part of my life. To represent your country is an incredible thing. I'm not happy about how people look at us as Americans, as athletes, as basketball people, and that's going to change, and we're going to change it, and if you want to be part of it, here's what you're going to need to do. And I went right through the list. And I said, if you can't do it all, you're out. I'll find 12 players who are going to buy in. But in most cases, I couldn't even get through half of what I wanted to say, and they were buying in. So that started the whole run that we've had. And it's been, for me, it's been incredibly rewarding to see. I love projects. I love opportunities I love challenges. And part of it is when you're an athlete, in my case, a former athlete, I've played, I've scouted, I've coached, I've owned, I've done all those things. The game is still a game. And business is a game to me. It's another competition. And it's about winning. And it's about doing it the right way. And so in classes that I've spoken to over the last few years here at GCU, I try to say these things in my own way. Life is relational. Your ability to relate to people and communicate with people will take you a long way. A long way. And those are skills you need to really develop. I missed the technology curve. I did. I struggle with my iPhone all the time and my iPad, but I get through it. But what I'm suggesting is don't rely 100% on technology. Be able to communicate with people, and that'll take you a lot further than you can imagine.
Think about what Jerry said from a standpoint of business. Having the vision to collaborate, bringing all those coaches together, making them a part of the process, and also getting their input on some of the things that needed to be improved. Collaboration, a systems approach for many of you MBA students of bringing the greatest basketball minds together as a starting point. I remember it well when they held this almost like a basketball convention with some of the greatest names. It was unbelievable. But there's another part of this that you have to realize. It's a big part of this equation. It's called remaining relevant and commanding, in a subtle but powerful way, a level of respect. Now, what do I mean by that? There's a story of one of the players coming in for his interview, and he's been sweating, and he's in his gym stuff, and he's got his suit bag. And he says to Jerry, hold on a second. I have to change first and put my suit on to do the interview. That's respect.
That's
you remember that well.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's important in today's world because, as you know, the level of ethics and morality is front and center in a lot of things that are going on right now. But imagine that. A player coming in saying, I got to clean up for my interview with Jerry. Tell us how important that is.
Yeah, that he's referring to Michael Redd, who was playing for the Milwaukee team at the time. And I was in Chicago, and it was a good place. First of all, it's a good place, regardless. And I feel very much at home when I'm there. But I just kind of headquartered there in a hotel because players are coming and going, and I could kill 3 or 4 or 5 birds with one stone, so to speak. But Michael Redd drove from Milwaukee to Chicago in his sweats after practice, and he did have a change with him, and he came up to my suite and asked to use the men's room so he could change, put on a suit and tie for the interview. Now that was pretty impressive. I mean, he had his thing together. I should add that in Athens, a number of players fell out, decided not to play because it didn't mean that much to them. And I'm talking about NBA players, stars. So the league, in trying to promote the future of the NBA, added 4 young players who had no business being selected. Who were they? Amari Stoudemire, LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, and Carmelo Anthony. They're all like 18, 19, 20. They hadn't earned it, but they were there. That was a disservice to them, honestly, because that wasn't right. As a matter of fact, one of the first players I met with was Carmelo. And a lot of my basketball people that we were referring to said, don't waste any time with Carmelo. He's this, he's that. And I said, no. I met with Carmelo and I said, I want you to know there are other basketball people who would say, who have said to me, pass on Carmelo for the following reasons. And I want to tell you what I am going to tell you, Carmelo. I wipe the slate clean. We start from scratch. And so if you want to be a part of it, fine. If you don't, that's fine with me too. I said, and I'm not offering you anything. I want you to know, if you're interested, I'll be watching you this year closely. Do you know that 3 times during the season he called me? How do you think I'm doing? Am I doing okay? Well, that's a role reversal, right? So I'm kind of proud of what he's accomplished. 3 gold medals, one of the best careers of all the players who's ever played in the Olympics, and he's nearing the end, of his career. That's a good story. And so I lost track of where I was going with that.
Well,
what was the
what's
question?
interesting? You bring up a great point here, though, and I think people are absolutely chomping at the bit for this $64,000 question, and that's this. You have got the greatest names in basketball. Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, Carmelo Anthony. All stars on their own teams. How do you, within the scope of team concept, bring these guys to share the basketball and create team when you're talking about some of the most dynamic superstars on the global stage? That's always been my curiosity. You got guys that want the ball, that want X amount of points, but when they get into this arena, it changes because of the culture. Describe that for us.
Well, Dr. Mueller and I both spoke at a conference this morning, and it was it's on integrity. And so as I talked about it, I mentioned the fact that in USA Basketball, we have goal standards. And goal standards are what we expect from the players, how we're all in it together. It's about teamwork, it's about integrity, it's about work ethic and selfless attitude and on and on. Well, you create this culture. It's all about the culture. And so when players are indoctrinated with this, which, by the way, in USA Basketball today, starts with 16-year-olds who are just finished a camp up in Colorado Springs where the best, 100 16, 17-year-old kids are there. It starts there. They're hearing all of this, the culture, they're all part of it, and they all aspire to be on the national team. So it starts with when they're at a younger age. That's what we've developed since '05 with the youth. That wasn't there before. So by the time we get to them, they want to be there. And that wasn't the case back in '05.
I think one of the other things, too, is one of the most provocative comments from Jerry, and it's not just about winning gold, it's about the health of basketball worldwide. And as Jerry said right after the Olympic Games, and I thought this was quite profound, basketball is the #2 sport in the world. But he kind of issued a proclamation, which was fascinating to me. So the rest of the world's got to get their act together when it comes to basketball. And when I look at that, what I heard throughout the Olympic Games is we're not taking anybody for granted. We are cautious about everything. And they continued to win and win and win, beat Serbia, won the gold. But I want you to take us deeper into that comment and describe what you really were saying to this audience.
Sure.
Here.
During the gold medal ceremony itself, the medals are being passed out to the athletes. One of the top officials with FIBA, the international ruling body for basketball, turns to me, and I'm on the court, and he says, it's not fair. You should play, the USA should play with only 4 players against everyone else's 5. And, again, the competitiveness in me kind of reacted like, that was an insult to me. And he should have been ashamed for even saying anything like that. And I did have that response. Maybe everyone else should get their act together and just do the job that needs to be done. Don't complain. I mean, we're that far ahead? Okay. Well, they have a job to do in their own respective countries. Now, they have issues. They don't have the financial wherewithal that they would like to have. They don't have the numbers of people. But it's not just about numbers. Look at China. We have 300 million people living in the United States. They have 300 million people playing basketball in China. They do. Do you know, when you see empty courts, and by the way, whenever I'm on campus and I see empty courts, I don't like that. I like to see people playing basketball. So even if you don't play, get a ball, shoot once in a while so I could see you on the court. But in China, you can't get playing time on a court. I mean, I'm talking about around the clock. With the lights on, people are playing in leagues on all these outdoor courts. They love the game. And so eventually, there's going to be other Yao Mings. There's going to be other players coming. And there's no doubt that where the players, if I were to pick a country and say, we've got some Australians on our basketball team, and I think a few of them are back in the corner. Australia's done a great job in basketball. They really have. Canada is another up-and-comer. There are a lot of really good players coming out of Canada, for sure. But look at Africa and the potential that's there, because, there are players who don't even know anything about the game. And once they're exposed, there's a guy at Philadelphia, Joel Embiid, who's from Cameroon. He played basketball the first time at 16. He was a soccer player, but he's a 7-footer with the skills of a guard because of soccer. He goes to Kansas, he's there and plays less than a season, and he gets drafted number 3, and he didn't play for 2 years because of a broken foot, and now he's playing. And I just saw him this past week in training camp and in a couple exhibitions, and I look at him, and he's a baby in the game. He's only played the equivalent of a year and a half or 2 of basketball. And it makes you wonder what he might become. So there's going to be a lot of great players. I mean, I got a call today about the group of young 16 and 17-year-olds who were up in Colorado Springs. And there's a 14-year-old kid, 14 years old, with a 7'4" wingspan at 14. It makes you wonder what he's going to be.
I think Dr. Mueller just put him on the recruiting list. There's a visit there somewhere. You know, Jerry, I have to ask you, because in the last few months, if you have a chance to YouTube this, there were some very, very profound speeches at the Hall of Fame this year, and a couple that jump out at me: the amazing story of Allen Iverson and the remarkable story of Shaquille O'Neal. And Jerry has transformed the Hall of Fame in terms of how dynamic it is today, when he was involved there as well. But it may not be basketball. It may be your business degree. It may be another opportunity. I guess I say that is that many times it's a ticket to ride when you look at what can happen when you have a passion for something. And I was so moved at how these players, Jerry, were so emotional on their basketball journey and the doors that it opened and continues to open. Here's Shaquille O'Neal now getting his PhD. Allen Iverson, who passionately takes care of his family. Reflect on that, because there were some really emotional speeches.
Over the years, there's been a lot of speeches that, first of all, they all come from the heart. And most often, 95% of the time, the players want to give credit to the people who helped them along the way, that it wasn't just them and their ability, but there were many people who were part of their team, if you will. And Shaq was terrific. He may come across as a clown sometimes with all the stuff he does. He's always having a good time, funny commercials, blah, blah, blah. But when you heard him speak about his family, and they were all there, all the kids, and his kids don't have options about where they're going to school or what they're going to do or what they're going to become. I mean, that's showing an interest in your kids. That to me was probably one of the most significant things. Allen Iverson, you wonder about you don't wonder about his ability and what he accomplished as a 6'1", 160-pound competitor on the court, and what he was able to accomplish. But someone who was taken advantage of by a lot of people in his own community, family, friends, etc. But he thanked everybody in the world. He spoke for like 38 minutes, and it didn't seem that long because it was so heartfelt. And so we kind of left that induction ceremony this year with long speeches, and no one complained about it because of the content, because of what the individuals had to say. So it was a special night.
Jerry, I want to connect with some of the students here from a standpoint that many of them want to go to maybe where you have been. And you have said some interesting things through the years, like be a sponge. Hang around people that are very, very good at their craft and be a good listener. And all of you have certain dreams and ambitions, whether it's with your education or your sport or your projects or your startups. Express to them the key to success from a business standpoint, from an academic standpoint, based on your own experience, on the key elements that allow these young people to chase their dreams.
Well, I'm glad you finished with that, because I think I'll start off with saying is you need to chase your dream. We're blessed in living in this country, the greatest country in the world, with all of its problems and hiccups that we have right now in this political climate that we're living in, which is a sad commentary, but it's still the best place in the world. And here you have a chance to come from humble beginnings. You're not in a system like in many countries. You're born into a kind of a caste system, and it's hard to get out or move up or anything like that. That's not true here. So you can make your own way. Now, what does it take? You need to be educated. You need to be someone who can communicate. You need to be aggressive to a degree. You need to get all this information that's so much available, it's unbelievable. But the best advice I could say is you got to start at the bottom. If you start with a mentality that no one's going to give you a freebie. You know, what I hear from a lot of young people is, well, how do I get a job? Well, the job will come if you prepare yourself. You got to prepare yourself as an individual. You got to develop your people skills. You need to be educated. That's why you're here. And so in trying to break into, you know, the sports industry, there's a lot of opportunities today that didn't exist 20 years ago or 40 years ago or whatever. You know, it used to be like a mom and pop. There weren't that many teams, mom and pop operations. So there are wonderful opportunities out there for you. You need to be aggressive, get out there and take any job you can. You don't start off as being an owner. You don't start off as being a general manager or the head coach of a team. You probably have to pay your dues. That's the real world. But it's worth it. It's all part of a journey. And the fun part is, if you're fortunate enough to live a long time, you look back on all the experiences you've had, like in my case, and I think I learned something everywhere at every stop, because it can only be done that way. Of course, you have to have self-confidence. You have to believe in yourself, but it takes more than you to make things happen. There are other people who are going to, you know, because of relationships, open doors, give you a shot, give you an opportunity. And so there's no simple answer to what Jude asked, except that don't just focus on, you know, how I want it all to happen right now, today. I want to know where I'm going to be when I graduate in May or June, and what job am I going to have? Now, I met some students from GCU today, this morning at this conference that I referred to, and one of them has a job as soon as he's out of school. The other one is going to continue on and get his master's degree, and it just depends where your focus is. So just like a coach coaching a team, the players have to be prepared. The coach's job is to prepare them. The instructors at this university are here to prepare you for your future. But you have to cooperate. You've got to do your piece. You have to be willing and wanting to be the very best. And so I'm thankful for the journey I had, because I came from humble beginnings, and it didn't matter to me what side of the tracks I lived on. I believed I was going to be on the other side someday. I didn't know when or how, but I believed it. And so I went after it. And so my response is, if it could happen to me, it could happen to any one of you, if you want it.
I want a final thought here, because I think it's important. It's not only what you do, it's how you do it in a moral, ethical, and faith-based way, because you have to live with yourself.
Correct.
I've seen this man on a handshake build a stadium, sign a contract with a top player. You have to live with yourself. And as a final thought, Jerry, bringing it home, I want you to address those very personal issues of faith and ethics in today's world.
Well, you know, we live in a world that is, you know, at the cliff, if you will, in terms of moral compass. And to me, that's disheartening. And what we need to do is come back to some of the very basic things that make life worth living. And that is, you know, it is about family. It is about faith. It's about community. And when you bring all of these elements together and you have your priorities where they should be. You know, I read something in the newspaper 40 years ago. Billy Graham used to have like a weekly small column, and this particular day I read about his piece was about priorities and how you have to look at things. What comes first in life? It should be your faith. What comes second? It should be your family. What comes third? It should be your work. And when people get that out of kilter, that's when things go wrong. This is basic stuff. We're making it too complicated. I'm referring to life. And so, you know, I think it starts at home. It really does. And we've seen a lot of splintering with our family unit. And I think when we became a mobile society after World War II, that's when things started to change. Nobody talked about divorce when I was a kid. Nobody got divorced, period. But once people scattered and, you know, two people in the household working and kids were on their own, and, you know, a lot of things happened. A lot of life changed. So that's been a big issue. So we need to strengthen our family unit again. We really do. A lot of our issues would start to heal and mend if we could do that. You know, the lack of respect people have for discipline, the lack of respect people have for authority. We need to respect authority. Whether we like it or not, there has to be some order to how we live our lives. And then thirdly, with the opportunities that are out there for us, it's up to each of us individually to do our piece and give back to the community. There's so much that can be accomplished if we kind of put our lives in order and start thinking about other people more so than ourselves. And when all of those things come together, it's a happier place.
I'm so excited that with the new basketball training facility, you're going to see a timeline of Phoenix and Grand Canyon University, and it just so happens to be the timeline of this man right here, Jerry Colangelo. And I tell you this, you only get one of these in the history of a city. A gentleman that has given back, that had a vision of moving forward in so many different ways, utilizing sports, but affecting people in a charitable way, in a business way, and moving this state into the 21st century. And I've said this many times on the air, it's a privilege to have been able to cover this and to be a small part of this growth that is absolutely transformative, that now centers right here on the campus of Grand Canyon University. I would like all of you to give Jerry a nice round of applause as we wrap it up for tonight. Thank you.